Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first edition of Crossing the Chasm. My name is David Nassau, and we're about to get started with our first guest, Andrew Burkett. He is the chief storyteller at Atheris Games. And before further ado, I'd like to have Andrew just introduce himself, say a couple words, describe his new amazing beard, and we're going to go into discussing certain uh, crowdfunding strategies because if anybody's been in Gainesville recently, they know that Andrew Burkett had just finished an amazing Kickstarter campaign that doubled his initial starting goal. So, Andrew, feel free to go and introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Andrew. I started a gaming company a few years back, so we mainly develop board and card games. Our goal is to create storytelling and incorporate my writing into board game and card game projects. So our first game is about annoying neighbors. So your goal is simply to annoy all the other players out of your proverbial neighborhood. We launched on Kickstarter in October and raised $20,000. We're developing a few other games now. Predominantly, we are working on a game with a children's hospital in order to provide that game with the sales of any of our other games. So we're developing it for people with chronic and terminal illnesses by people with chronic and terminal illnesses, essentially. So.
Wow. And yeah, I appreciate that. And so throughout this whole live webcast, I do want to tell all of our viewers that if they would like to ask any questions, there should be a widget somewhere on your screen, and it has Q&A on it. And if you ask a question, uh, I have something showing on my end that shows if there are any questions that people are interested in asking, either Andrew or myself. So as we get into the major topic of today's conversation, again, it is focused on crowdfunding and specifically crowdfunding strategies. There are a lot of things that people don't necessarily know, and it's not necessarily discussed when it comes to the topic. And one of the areas I'd like to focus on right now is really if you're thinking about launching a crowdfunding campaign, there are a lot of different avenues, there are a lot of different ways to go, and there are a lot of different platforms to do so. So my first real question to Andrew is, how did you end up picking Kickstarter, and what was some of the initial processes while getting that together?
All right, so for gaming in specific, I found that Kickstarter was the best medium. So essentially what I did is I looked into all the crowdfunding platforms and I found the one that was best suited to my individual industry. So I found Indiegogo is a lot better for like social projects. So if you are gonna have some sort of social mission, people on Indiegogo typically believe in it a lot more than Kickstarter people who seem to be more focused on the reward more so than helping the project creator now. And then the Kickstarter space for gaming, it's one of their top categories. So I just knew a lot of people had done Kickstarter and I felt more comfortable using the platform than any other one. And I realized that I would get more traction of people seeing the campaign that had never heard of me and had never heard of the company or the game and would just pledge or support it because they saw it on Kickstarter, whereas I thought the other platforms wouldn't give me the same reach. And then I basically talked to other project creators who had started gaming projects and asked them some of the questions about, why did you chose Kickstarter? And once I started getting answers and started seeing trends, then I, decided to use Kickstarter myself.
Awesome. And so before I even continue to my next question, I do want to introduce the environment that we're both having this interview in, and that is in Bryan Hall. Right now, we're located in what's called the CEI, the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. And this houses a number of different resources for students, whether it be the Master's in Entrepreneurship program, the minor in Entrepreneurship, and what I'm going to ask Andrew to actually discuss a little bit is the Gator Hatchery. But I do want to just throw out that if anybody's interested in entrepreneurship and has any questions, to come on by Bryan Hall and ask anybody who's here. We have a wonderful staff and ask.
Can you still hear me? Uh, 1 second. What happened? Can you still hear me? All right, it froze. I don't know what to do here. How do I re-pull it up? Do you know? Is it working now? Can you hear me? Is it working now? All right. What? Okay. No, mine. You dropped, but I'm still on here. All right. Can you hear me now? All right. So I will gladly plug the Gator Hatchery. So Gator Hatchery is a space where they allow student ventures to work and collaborate, and they provide us resources. So they help us somewhat monetarily, help us with finding resources we need, whether it's key investors, entrepreneurs in residence that work with the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, mentors, lawyers, accountants, that sort of thing. And then they also provide workshops where we're able to interact on a closer basis with several of the distinguished University of Florida alumni and the distinguished speakers that they bring in for various events. So we're able to meet these people and create connections that sometimes have developed into investment and that sort of thing. The other thing is they provide us the space free of charge, so we're able to have a office space and look more presentable as a business, get interns, that sort of thing. Some of the things I did to start the campaign. Okay, so essentially I reached out to previous creators and found what worked best for them. I asked them some questions about it. I feel one of the best ways to learn is finding people who have done it before. So I found people who had done it and just asked them simple questions, asked them for a few minutes of their time. And then I looked in other campaigns and I found things I liked and didn't like. So there were some graphic structures in some of the other campaigns that I really liked. And then Exploding Kittens is known as, like, you know, the top crowdfunding campaign for gaming pretty much ever. They raised like $8.8 million. And so I searched their campaign for things that I felt would be relevant to our campaign. So like their graphic structure was very good. So they had really nice headings and well done images to make the campaign look professional and get people to really believe in it. And so I incorporated a lot of that. I worked with an artist who was able to develop all those graphics. So we also we have an artist for the actual art for the game, and we have a graphic designer, layout designer, Sebastian, who worked on the Kickstarter and works on the card layouts. And then so a lot of it was artwork. We made sure to test the typing. We sent out drafts of what the page would look like to people in the industry several weeks before we launched the campaign, so we could see what people liked and didn't like. And there were a few things that we notably did wrong, and I'm sure that will be a later question, so I can talk about some of the things we did wrong and that later. But.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And so, yeah, we will definitely talk about that soon. And now, but before we get to that level, when it comes to your initial, you know, designs, and I guess what you're just kind of referring to is how a successful campaign looks visually pleasing and looks professional versus something that someone just threw together in 2 days and threw up online. So what kind of resources did you have initially, and how did you utilize them in order to get those you're a designer, and where do you find certain people? What are some resources that you can probably share to myself and the audience to help get you to that level where you felt comfortable and professional enough to launch the Kickstarter?
Absolutely. So I think one of the main things with crowdfunding is a lot of people see it as like an easy way to get money. And so they just throw something up there and expect that it's going to do $1 million and then they're going to make a bunch of money. And there's just such an abundance of campaigns that people really look for things that they can support, that they feel they're going to actually deliver on the rewards. So it was said that 9% of successfully funding campaigns actually don't deliver all of their rewards. And so the main thing we wanted to show early on is that the campaign was not only going to deliver all the rewards, but we're going to go above and beyond, and our customer service was going to be that of, a thriving company, not that we were just going to take the money and run like some of the other campaigns have done.
Interesting.
So what I wanted to do is present the best foot forward, essentially. So I found an artist on Behance. It's Adobe's website for creatives. And I found him because I liked his other sticker work. And I was looking at it and I was like, wow, this guy's portfolio is good. And I talked to him and realized that he had the exact art style I wanted. So I asked him how much money it would be, and he told me a number that was way too high for our budget. And so I was like, no, I'll give you like 20% of that. And he was like, okay. And so then I had him work on only a few cards so that we could make the Kickstarter look like we had all the artwork done for the game. And we didn't like explicitly tell people, all of it's done, but we were showing that we had enough done that they could see that what everything was going to look like. And we posted in our updates. The thing is, backer updates are incredibly important. I'll talk more about that. But we posted it there that, the artwork wasn't done, but people didn't care as much because they could see that it was progressing. They were seeing that the artwork was going to be there. So I got as much of it done that I thought was necessary to prove that it looked like an established company and it looked like a game from a much bigger company than we are. And then kind of tried to quell any potential fears that people would have that we wouldn't deliver.
Interesting. Wow. And cool. So Behance. I don't think I've ever heard of that. I know that there's like used to be something called Odesk that people used to go to, Fiverr, and there are a couple other basic companies and websites that people go to get some quick freelance work and artwork done. But yeah, so now as we're getting closer to the actual the launch of the Kickstarter, in the maybe like the week leading up to it, what were some of the major things that you're trying to think of to make sure that you covered all your bases? I know that you hustled a lot, you promoted it, but what's like that process that you went through, and what were some of the major keys to success that you had to hit before, like right before you launched?
Okay, so I think one of the main things that Kickstarter's algorithm uses when you actually start a campaign is how soon you fund, how many unique backers you have, and the percent funded. So I wanted to fund really early on and show initial traction. And so one of the main things I was promoting very heavily a week before the campaign, trying to get people to pledge as soon as it went live so that it looked like all these people were spurring to the campaign, and they were. So essentially what we did is we held launch parties in every city that I had an affiliation with, essentially. And we had all these people ready to donate. So in Gainesville, there's an event called Startup Hour where entrepreneurs meet and mingle with each other. And I knew that that's kind of the event where they support entrepreneurship and they support young ventures. And so I thought that would be a good place to kind of start it. And so we started on the night of a Startup Hour intentionally. And then the week before, I was writing articles. I was having my social media intern at the time post a lot of content so that we could gain followers and we could gain people interested in the Kickstarter. We had done play testing. So we reached out to some of our play testers and got them to realize that the campaign was about to go down so that they would support early on, which we were lucky enough that a lot of them did. And then the other thing, like I said, because the launch parties drew so many people to it, we were on kind of like the popular page for gaming on Kickstarter. So we were able to pick up a lot of traction within the first 52 hours essentially.
Awesome, awesome. And to kind of build off of what you were just talking about, Startup Hour is one of my it is my personal favorite event every month in Gainesville. It's a huge happy hour networking event where all of the cool kids in Gainesville come together. There's free drinks. I think it's Bud that gets bought out by a couple people in town that have had some successful ventures themselves, and now it's been a hot spot for a lot of local entrepreneurs. Again, it's once a month. It's typically the third Thursday of every month in Gainesville. And in addition to that, we also have the Entrepreneurship Club meetings and Gator Innovators. And if you went to this last startup hour, you probably heard Xavier Richardson talking about something called iWeek. And iWeek is a week of innovation, a week of awesome, cool events that are focused on innovation, hosted by the Innovation Academy. I'm sporting their shirt right now. And this is one of the final iWeek events. So for all of the people who've been a part of the Innovation Academy events leading up to iWeek, hope you guys had a good time. And again, Xavier, great job on a successful week. And there's also an event coming on later today at 6 p.m. If you guys are willing to build an app, you can find all of that information on the Innovation Academy website or their Facebook page /iWeek. And so, but now back to crowdfunding real fast. Now let's just say the first week or so of launching your campaign. All right, you click the button to launch. What is that experience like? And then what are some of your first things on your to-do list once that happens?
All right, so it was kind of cool for a minute. It was like a minute of, whoa, we're alive. And then it was a minute of, oh, crap. Now people have to actually support this. Is it going to do as well as I hope it's going to do? Is it going to get on the popular page? So then I'm like trying to hustle around the startup hour, trying to get people to pledge and getting money. And then the other thing is like I'm wanting to write to reporters. I wanted to fund within the first or get close to funding within the first night so I could write about it. Because reporters won't write about Kickstarters unless they think it's going to fund, because then they look stupid. So I waited until we were kind of close to funding and was like, hey, you should write about this. So that night was all like writing to newspaper people and reporters of various media outlets, gaming people, and being like, hey, you should write about us. We're awesome. And then we didn't fund within the first 48 hours like I wanted. We funded in like 52 hours. So then the next few days was also using that in every subject line for emails. Was like, oh, we funded $10,000 in 52 hours. And then the reporters would answer, and we got on the local news stations a lot. We got into a lot of like gaming media. So we were trying to ride the media wave because we, as a smaller company, we didn't have the social media following to really push people to the campaign during. So we did a lot of writing as well. We wrote a lot of articles so that people would find our content and then support the Kickstarter based on it. So we're really transparent about what was going on in the campaign. We let everyone know, like, oh shit, this is scary. We don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
And we showed people like our funding graphs, like anything that we can show people, we pretty much show them. We're not really too scared of providing information. So I actually wrote Medium articles, you will know this, David, but about sort of the process of funding, and then how our middle 2 weeks, we didn't have the social media following that some other companies had. And once my friends and family stopped backing it and it got away from the popular page and it wasn't a new project anymore, it goes down the list. And so for someone to find it on Kickstarter, it gets a lot harder unless you bring more people to it. And then the media outlets we were getting into weren't drawing enough people to it for us to really get back on the popular page. So the middle 2 weeks were very stagnant. And I feel like a lot of campaigns go one of two ways. It either blows up or it stagnates. That normally isn't going to be like, oh yeah, a decent increase every week. It's going to either jump up or it's going to stay. It's not going to do anything else.
Interesting. So what are some of the strategies in those middle 2 weeks, and especially as you're going towards the latter half of your campaign, that you kind of brainstormed and tried to execute? What are some of the what's the thought process that you were in, and how did you try to overcome that?
I was mainly trying to get people in the industry to see me and see the campaign, and so I was trying to get several people to write about it so that we would have multiple impressions on the same people. Essentially, we wanted, like, if you see the campaign once in the media, then we would want you to see it once, another time in a different media outlet, and then another time. So you would have multiple interactions with us and hear about us several times before going to the Kickstarter. We knew like one interaction wasn't going to be enough, so we wanted to target the same people as many times as possible.
Interesting.
We actually didn't have any money for advertising, so we literally did one advertisement the whole campaign. It was like $300, and they guaranteed that they would make us $500 back, and they did. So it worked.
Solid investment.
The main thing is with Kickstarter, more than the money, it helped us because all those new backers got us back on the popular page and got us more backers in turn. So even though they weren't directly backing because of that, it helped us get new backers that we wouldn't have otherwise, even outside of what they got from the advertisement.
So is that like a tool? Was that a company? What was that you came across that you did?
It's a company called Backer Club. So essentially, it's a club of the top, I think, like 1,000 Kickstarter backers. They have to, in order to be like invited to it, you have to have backed at least 50 campaigns, and you have to back a certain number every, so long, like every year, or month, or whatever it is, in order to stay a part of the club. And then you get like exclusive discounts on Kickstarters. So we had to provide we provided a special card to those backers. So they all get something out of each Kickstarter, and then the Kickstarter project creators get all these backers who are known to back a bunch of projects. So it kind of works on all angles.
Cool.
So, yeah, it was interesting, and they're very selective of what projects are shown on there, so that you could apply to Backer Club and not get in, essentially. So
Cool. Well, I appreciate you sharing that anyway. That's I did not know that. Now, as we come to like the last week, closing out the campaign, was there anything that you did that you think was special? Or was there anything that you wish you did at this specific point? Looking back, I know you funded in 52 hours. You got a middle 2 weeks where it was a little stagnant, and then the last week, what happened, and what would you do? What did you do, and what would you do a little differently?
So essentially, for Kickstarters, especially if you're going to fund early on, you have to add a lot of stretch goals and find what your backers really want. So I found what I thought our backers wanted. So I would ask them in updates and that sort of thing, what do you want? And then they would say it, and I would be like, I think I can do that. And I would just make it a stretch goal. Some of the stuff, honestly, were things we had already thought about. We just didn't want to expend the money because we didn't have it at our $10,000 goal. So we made it stretch goals, and it just way overfunded because of that. So like our $17,500 stretch goal was that we would add a game board, so it becomes a board game rather than a card game, and it's just art. It doesn't change the game any, and we would add these rage meters that keep track of scores. So it's minor little things, but to players that means a lot. It really helps facilitate the game, so you don't have to keep track on your phone or using a dice or anything like that. And so those little things we were able to fund extra through the Kickstarter, and those stretch goals really helped push us above what I think we would have otherwise. What we probably would have done more, I would have, if I had the money, I guess, which I didn't, I would have spent money on Facebook ads and other online advertisements to target the same people over and over again, so that I could get more people to just spontaneously back it right at the end, because then they don't really have time to cancel their pledge, and then you kind of lock them in.
Cool. No, I appreciate you sharing. And so now, took us through the whole campaign, the pre-Kickstarter, the during the Kickstarter, and as it was closing out, obviously it was a successful Kickstarter. And then what? Now the Kickstarter is over, and now what happens?
So the second it funds, you're like, whoa, that was awesome. So like for us, we were in Jacksonville play testing with one of our backers. He bought a bunch of copies for his retail stores, and we saw it fund over 200% of our goal. So our last stretch goal, right at the like last 2 minutes while we were playing the game in his store, and it was like really cool. Everyone was like, "What? That's awesome! Congratulations!" All that kind of stuff. And then it was like, "Oh shit! Now we have to do this." So we had manufacturers lined up and all that kind of stuff, but it's just a lot of work. And so even though gaming project probably sounds pretty easy, there's a lot that goes into it that we didn't really anticipate as much, like buying UPC codes and getting retail sales and trying to sell the game before you actually have, a big unit of production of it, and realizing that in order to make the game more expandable, we wanted to change one rule set because one of our backers told us about it after the campaign, and then incorporating that made us change a bunch of rules. And even though the base game is the same as we said in the Kickstarter, now we have 2 versions of rules and we're still testing them and trying to make sure everything works while trying to meet our production schedule. And so then you're working on the schedule, working with, in my case, artists and layout designers, and working with my team to get the game design process right, and then working with the manufacturers, trying to make sure that Chinese manufacturers are going to be able to produce it at the quality you want it. So we had production samples and that sort of thing, but then we were trying to pit that manufacturers against each other to try to get their quotes as low as possible. So that was a process after the Kickstarter. And then the other thing is, you don't actually get the money for like 2 weeks. So there's a few weeks where if you don't have the money already, you're kind of stuck. Your production kind of slows down. So for us, luckily, like we had already paid the artist, so it wasn't gonna help us any to have the money then. But for some campaigns, they can't start until they have the money to manufacture. And so those 2 weeks are dead weeks that people don't really encounter. They don't really understand that you're gonna take several weeks to actually get the money.
Wow, 2 weeks. That's a long time.
Minimum.
Yeah, wow. And is it any change when if it's like international? Do you know that?
I don't think so. It uses Amazon payment services. So the other thing is there's a few costs that people don't really anticipate. People always anticipate the Kickstarter cost. They realize those fees. They don't really realize you have payment processing fees and that people drop pledges. So if your card is not charged until after the Kickstarter. So if my card is declined after a Kickstarter, then that project creator never got the funds. And so therefore the Kickstarter may read $20,000, but you really only end up with $19,000 or something like that. And then after fees, so like for ours, after all the fees and drop pledges, we actually got 17,700, and we
Wow.
$20,049 on the Kickstarter. So
Wow.
it was over $2,000 different from what people would actually read on the Kickstarter.
Wow. That's like that's like over 10% of what you had, right? So that's crazy.
Yeah.
And so now, when it comes to the post Kickstarter phase, this is going to be the last thing we're going to talk about for today. And I appreciate for all of our viewers sticking around. The post Kickstarter phase, what are some of the major points that you've done and that you are continuing to do that you think is vital to the success? Not only obviously the Kickstarter is over, but for the success of your company and for retaining the followers. What have you been doing over the past couple of weeks and months, really, since your campaign has ended?
Okay, so one of the main things, like I said, backer updates, doing them throughout the campaign is pretty normal. Like most project creators realize that that's a thing that they have to do. I try to make mine funny. The game is funny, and I just think people read things that are funnier more often. So I add GIFs to like every single one of my backer updates. It takes me forever to craft. Like I craft them. They're not like, oh, I'm gonna write something real quick and send it out. Like I actually double, triple check it. Like everything is done officially. And then I wanted to send thank you cards and stickers to all of our backers as kind of a small thank you and small gesture to prove that, you know, we're going to deliver. And even though it's going to take a little longer than we expected, honestly. So there's probably a month in our production schedule late of when we anticipated. And so we wanted to show we're doing it. We just didn't realize we would encounter some of these problems that we've encountered. We've been very open with our backers, letting them know about the problems and that we're here to assist them with anything that they need help with. And we actually haven't had any complaints about it being late because we've just been very open about what's going on. So the artists have taken a little longer than we thought. And the thing is, there's just a lot of artwork in the game, and the artist is a perfectionist, which is a good thing. The art for the game is going to be incredible. It's just that it takes a little longer when he wants things to be perfect. And so we're not trying to speed that process up or anything. We're trying to get him to work more, but not sacrifice quality. And he realizes that, and we're working to keep the game quality the same. We're not going to sacrifice that. And I think a lot of the backers understand that, so we just post a lot of updates to say that. The other thing is we still accept pre-sales, but we're not selling the game at the price we sold it for on Kickstarter. We're selling it for about $5 more. And now we're trying to get larger retail sales, trying to get the game moving because we're actually buying excess inventory more than what we sold on the Kickstarter.
Cool. Well, if we were to try to find your company or even try to find the pre-sales, where can we find that, and how can we contact you if we were interested in you know, maybe either any follow-up questions or just doing more research on Atheris Games?
All right, so I have a link that I can share with you for Backer Kit. That's where all of our pre-sale mechanisms are currently. As far as reaching out to me, my email is andrew@atherisgames.com, so anyone can message me on there. Our website is currently in development, so right now, going to that will not really do much. But that's being worked on now, so within the next week or two, that should be up.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's all that I had for you today. I appreciate you coming and spending some time with us. If people can come to me and have more questions about crowdfunding or really have any other questions that you might be able to answer, I'll direct them your way, or maybe we might schedule another Crossing the Chasm episode with Andrew Burkett and ask you some more questions and insights and any advice you might be willing to have. But yeah, and so on that note, if anybody does have any topics that they'd like to hear about, or if anybody has any people they might want me to ask them a couple of interesting questions to, feel free to reach out to me at my Twitter handle, Instagram handle. It's at @thedavidnassau, or just email me at david@mshopscotch.org, david@mshopscotch.org. And I'll be more than happy to come and sit down with you and maybe hear what you guys are interested in. So again, feel free to reach out to myself, feel free to reach out to Andrew, and I appreciate you taking the time to join us on Crossing the Chasm. This is our first episode, a part of the Innovation Academy's I Week, and hope to see you guys soon. Thank you again. Signing off.